You did talk about South Africa, and obviously the Expropriation Act of 2024 is kind of a really big issue. I think to start off from the outset, I should mention that I also don't agree about the more terrible slogans, cue the boards. Obviously, I think is terrible. But I think it's good to have context where the Expropriation Act is coming from. And I think drilling down a little bit, I want to pick your thoughts based on the fact that white South Africans only account for about 10% of the population, and they own about 72% of private land in South Africa. And I think it's always really good also to pretty much draw back a little bit from the historic background behind it. I think it goes back to about 1913, the Native Acts land, which severely, disproportionately discriminate against Black South Africans from owning land in South Africa. And that's what's caused much of the disparity we see economically. So I wanted to find out from you, what are your thoughts? And obviously, the Trump administration has really been big on what's going on in South Africa at the minute and the act itself that they enacted. So do you think it's a moral obligation that obviously you're talking about that the land that was expropriated back in the days historically, and that was a colonial endeavor altogether, does that land need to be returned to Black South Africans?
No, but they've already, so I know dangerously little about this. And so, again, what I said on stage is what I know, so I'm going to have to understand. I'm an American. I'm just trying to educate myself on UK politics, and so you will probably know more about this than I will. But is it not true, and you can correct me, in the last 20 years, they've tried some form of reparations with Black South Africans?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that correct? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, there's been, but it's not worked. So the BBE,
that's right.
for instance,
Okay, so time out. So taking stuff from one group and giving it to Blacks doesn't work?
Well, it does work, but I'll give you context as well.
Well, you just said it doesn't work.
I'll give you context.
Contradicted yourself, so educate me. I don't know enough, but you just contradicted yourself. You went from it doesn't work to it does work, so please.
I'll give you context as well. So what they did is they did have a program called the Black Empowerment Economic Program. And pretty much what they did is for every corporation, they would have to incorporate Black people within it. But that's not worked really well. And what we've seen over time is that a lot of Black people that have been part of those organizations have only been a minority. So pretty much, as you mentioned, you talked about DEI. So it's just pretty much checking a box, right? You have a Black person within the senior management group, but it's only probably 2 people and the like, and that's pretty much it. But the majority of Black South Africans that do not own any land, because obviously the historic context that I gave, cannot pretty much be able to earn a good living, because, with land also comes economic opportunity, and that's been the biggest disparity in South Africa.
And excuse my ignorance on this. What I understand, though, is that the land owned by Black South Africans is actually not as productive as those owned by the Boers. Is that correct?
Well, at the minute, 72% of private land, agricultural land, is owned by white South Africa.
No, I understand
only
that,
a minority.
Fair enough, but the 28%, when compared to Boer-run farms, are actually not as productive, because running a farm in South Africa is very difficult.
Yes.
Am I correct by saying that?
Well, context again.
Well, I just want to make sure I'm clear that actually running a farm for over 100 years is actually really impressive.
100%.
Yeah, so we agree on that.
Yes, we agree on that.
So thank you, because I don't know enough about this, but I do think that that's important to note, that even the Black South Africans that own land, it actually is not as fruitful or has the same yields as those that have been doing it for over 100 years, in a time when there's actually food instability in the region and in South Africa.
But obviously, what I'll say is, over time, if, say, you did have an act that expropriates land from Black South Africans, you need to build capacity over time. And I think the government is doing that for the minority of Black people that own agricultural farmland in South Africa, and they've been doing that. But also, we can't deny the fact that if you control supply chains for over a century, right, then it means that you pretty much control the economy, right? So how best do you think, obviously the land was taken from Black people, and South Africans, white South Africa has been pretty much, improving the economic outcomes over time. What do you think is the best way to break even in that sense?
Fair question.
And I just want to make one point to you. If obviously you look at key philosophers as well, like Robert Nozick, for instance, he talks about equality in terms of acquisition, as well as the process through which you acquire that land, and obviously correcting the injustice that comes out of it. So what would be your thoughts on that?
I'm not familiar with the philosopher you mentioned. Who was the name again?
Robert Nozick.
Okay.
He's a very prominent philosopher.
I'll look into it. Sure. Thank you for that. I don't know enough about South Africa to suggest anything. Here's what I could tell you, that race-based politics is really bad. I know this because I'm living it in my country. And I think that South Africa should get away from race obsession and should get towards something that is rooted in merit and empowerment.
Let your patriotic values guide how you invest your money and save for your future. With Monorail's Patriot Portfolio, your investment dollars get out of globalist corporations and into companies that support Christian and American values. Monorail
America's what, 75% black? Is that correct? 80%? Maybe
Yeah,
more?
that's right.
Right. And so explain to me, like post-apartheid, outside of the land ownership, maybe there's a business element. Why is it that once apartheid was removed, why black South Africans were not able to see their material economic net worth go up in the last 20 or 30 years? What do you think there's any, and maybe I don't know enough, are there any cultural inhibitions of a defeatist attitude that has basically, let's say, infected the minds of poor South Africans last 20 years that feel as if they can't accumulate wealth? Do you think that plays a factor?
Yeah, I think what's really infected black South Africans is pretty much going back what we're talking about. Obviously, from the colonial background that I just gave you, and we see a lot of like neo-colonialism, you control the supply chains, and you own 72% of agricultural farmland. How do you expect the majority black people to improve their lives and their outcomes when you pretty much control everything?
Enough. And so this is a sloppy but best example I can give. Is that fair? I'll do it. So just grant me some mercy here. What percentage of American land is owned by Asians?
Buyers!
Who are you? Are you crazy?
Are you the boss? Your advertisement says that.
Not sure.
Yeah, less than 3%. They are the richest racial group in America. So maybe land ownership isn't the only thing that matters to get wealthy.
Well, I do recognize that a lot of companies and aspects
hold on a second.
Why
forget the supply chain, forget the land. Land is basically all owned by white people in America, okay? Yet Asians, Indians are by far the richest group. So why is it that this particular group that happens to own the land and the supply chains, and we've admitted it's very hard to run this land, very hard to run this idea of farming in South Africa, it feels to me, I could be wrong, that it's a group of resentment-driven politics towards a group of people that own land instead of opportunity and empowerment-based politics, talking to the black majority about how they could build a better life for themselves instead of taking away other people's stuff.
Well, maybe the question could be as well, why do you think white South Africans that pretty much acquired that land through unjust means are so apprehensive and they don't really want to break even or probably give up much of the land that was stolen?
Hold on, that's a mindset issue. There's plenty in America that gets labeled as quote unquote stolen. Plenty. However, it doesn't necessarily always hold back every ethnic group that is in the country, that is even in the minority of the country. And so I guess the question is, it's a mindset. I don't know South African law enough. I don't know if it's a free market based. I really don't. I'm not just playing cute. But as a general operating principle, it's very bad to build a political movement around taking other people's stuff because you're obsessed with what you don't have instead of the mental energy to create what you want and what you think you deserve. We've seen this with a lot of groups to America. And America is a very interesting petri dish because we have a lot of people that come to our country with nothing. We have Cubans, we have Venezuelans, we have Colombians, we have Persians. And a rule is the group that complains the least and focuses all of their combined cultural energy on creation does really well over multiple years. That might not be possible in South Africa. There might be like no process to create wealth, but I would just venture a guess that market principles transcend borders. So my postulation, and I'm glad you admitted it, don't say kill the Boers. Bad, we should say that. It has created real deaths and real harm. If I was in charge, which of course I'm not, I would spend all my time not saying kill the Boer, kill the Boer. I would say, my people, get your act together. Let's work harder. Let's prove the Boer wrong. Let's start a business. Let's build families. One is driven in resentment and greed and envy and confiscation, and one is rooted in creation and entrepreneurship and optimism. I'd like to see the latter.
Well, it's very interesting you call it confiscation. What about if we call it probably reclaiming the land that was stolen back in the days?
Yeah,
but here's the thing as well.
Okay, but can I please, okay.
Maybe as well, kind of understanding the value of land, right? Much of what happens with land is obviously, and I think a very prominent economist talks about this, a guy called Hernando de Soto in his book, The Mystery of Capital.
I know Hernando.
Yeah, he talks about it really. When it comes to land, the value of land is that obviously you can borrow against it. And we've seen for much of agriculture, commercial land, which is very
Totally
expensive,
analogy.
really.
Legit, I get it.
And that's the thing, right? So if you own land pretty much everywhere, you can extract a lot of value out of it.
So can I interject really quick? Let's try another moral principle. Is it ever right to punish a grandchild for their grandfather's sins?
Not necessarily, but
Well, hold on. You're
context.
suggesting
Context is very important.
They did not steal the land. Someone related to them stole the land. So why punish them? They look like them. They talk like them. They were related to them. But you are talking about actively punishing a human being that did not do the atrocity.
I'm not saying we should actively punish them, right?
Okay, but you're saying, I just want to make sure I'm clear. You went back to these three principles: making wrong the justice, redistributing.
Yes.
So
correcting the injustice, I think.
So
is a fair
correcting the
deal.
justice, let's say, theoretically, it would be that we want some of this land to go back to Black South Africans. That's confiscation, right? No, you no longer own it. This group's going to own it. Therefore, you are punishing a grandkid for the sin of a grandfather. How is that morally defensible?
I think it gets back to the same thing. And how is it morally defensible if, say, the land that you own at the moment was stolen land, and it has over time created a massive disparity economically for much of the majority of Black people out there. So they could make the same argument as well.
Fair enough. And we would say, but the code that we believe in the West, and South Africa can choose, that inheritance, something that you did not work for, and all of a sudden that you have, and that you are then nurturing, we're not going to take that away from you if you did not do anything individually wrong, because this is the difference. We believe in individual-based, not collectivist group-based politics. So they're saying this group took this from this group, therefore this group must get something else. We're asking, did that individual do anything wrong? That individual is a different person than the grandfather. So what is the solution? The solution is for Black South Africans to understand the injustice, and I'll grant you all that I know nothing about the 1913. I should learn about it, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, right? But I do know that there was a lot of immoral behavior to the let's say not the acceptance, but the gaining of the land, right?
That's right.
I acknowledge that. Fine. The question is then what to do. And a general rule that has worked in America, and I'll kind of repeat my point, is the group, whomever it is, if they have a mentality and a mantra that is about creation and not about resentment, will succeed. This is actually really bad for even the people. Even if they got all the land back, let me tell you,
naked, completely rebuilt.
it would not necessarily be a good thing. Number one, we've already shown that they can't necessarily manage it. It's very hard. The Boers have developed a method of farming in the last 100 years.
How do you justify that?
Well, because I just told you, and you agreed with me. I asked a question, which I think I knew, and you affirmed it. The Black South African farmers are not nearly as productive as the equivalent Boer farmers. They're not. The same land, same fertile soil, the farms equivalent are not as necessarily productive. But again, just as a general rule, and we can have clarity but not agreement, I think it's a bad idea to nationalize complaints into a political movement. I think it's very dangerous. And then the right, we fall into this sometimes too. In South Africa, it's even more dangerous to weaponize racial complaints, despite the injustices of past. It's a better use of time to talk about a victor mindset, not a victim mindset.
Yeah, I think it's easily said than done. That would be my kind of thinking.
But it's simply a mindset.
Yeah,
but the groups that embrace it in America and across the West, they succeed. The Jews have had a lot of crap thrown at them the last 100 years. They get their act together, they organize, they understand how to, create wealth. And again, I would say there are many groups that are parallel to that. So you want to make a final point? I don't know how we are in time. But
yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, again, we have clarity. I would like to see, of course, an end of the kill the Boers. But my hope for South Africa is one that is rooted in empowerment and lifting up and optimism, not being like, well, something bad happened to my grandfather, therefore it impacts me. It actually doesn't impact you as much as you think. You're a free being with your own agency and your own ability. Was it wrong? Yes. Is it inhibiting? I would say no.
Yeah, I would say that I think cooperation is probably the pathway going forward. And I think breaking even is a good thing because the Expropriation Act actually does pretty much cut for that, where much of land that's not being used can then be shared. And
I will look into it.
I think that'll be a better way to go.
I'll read more about it. Thank you very much.
Enough.
Thank you.